caring for individuals with ALS.
I started to have muscle twitching throughout my left hand and arm. And I think we've all had muscle twitching before, but after about 6 months, I said to Suzanne, this hasn't stopped. Maybe I should go see the doctor.
Neil Alexander is describing some of the initial symptoms he was experiencing about 3 years ago. After a few trips to the doctor, the diagnosis was clear. It was ALS. ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, commonly referred to as Lou Gehrig's disease, is a debilitating disorder of the motor nerves. This disease is characterized by rapidly progressive muscle weakness and spasms, difficulty speaking, and difficulty breathing.
When he told me, my doctor came in the room and he said, I'm sorry, but I'm fairly certain that you have ALS. And I kind of knew what that was. I knew it was bad, but I could just tell from the mood in the room. I didn't know how bad. It was in the back of my head, this is not good. So the air leaves the room, and I'm a pretty action-oriented person, so it only took me about 30 seconds to kind of gather myself, and I said to the doctor, so what do we do now?
Sally Renault's husband, Red, also received the same ALS diagnosis as Neil. Red died 4 months later. With the help of home care aides, Sally managed to keep him in their house until the day he died, but at times it was very difficult for her.
Several times he fell backwards because he lost all his strength in his muscles and he couldn't sit. And then they gave him special silverware, but that didn't work too good. But I let him feed himself as long as he could. But then there came a point where I had to start feeding him and the aides had to start feeding him. I was lifting his legs one by one up our steps, and we have our bedroom and bathrooms are all on the second floor. So I would lift one leg at a time and he would hang over the railing to try to hang on, and he would say, I can't hold on. Be careful, don't, and it was just a struggle getting him up and down. Getting him into the car was becoming a struggle. It was getting to the point that I had a hard time getting him down my back steps into the car.
Most people with ALS die from respiratory failure, usually within 3 to 5 years from the onset of symptoms. However, about 10% of ALS patients survive for 10 or more years. In almost all cases, the disease occurs at random, with no clearly associated risk factors. At some point, most ALS patients will need a home care aide to help provide assistance in bathing, dressing, grooming, and transporting. Phyllis Frund's husband, Thornton, has had ALS for 8 years and is still living in their home. Phyllis performs much of the caregiving duties herself, along with the assistance of a wonderful home care aide.
I get him up in the morning, I dress him, I give him breakfast, make him lunch, make him dinner, whatever he needs. Blow his nose, whatever he needs.
Being a home care aide for an ALS consumer presents many challenges because every ALS patient is different at different stages, with a variety of obstacles to face.
You could have a patient who was totally quadriplegic, unable to move any voluntary muscles, and that person would need a Hoyer lift to get them out of bed into a chair. And then you could have a patient who is unable to move either arm, so their arms are kind of just hanging there, but they can still walk. So with that particular patient, they can walk into the tub, but then the aide would need to do the actual washing.
We tell them that they have to be patient, that they have to listen, because some people don't, some of the ALS consumers don't speak, as clearly as others do. So we tell them to listen, learn their language. It's their own language. You need to learn that language.
For instance, Thornton's ALS has affected his speech tremendously, but not his brain, and certainly not his sense of humor.
I want him to be my slave. Tell her.
He said, I want him to be my slave.
And that's because these muscles are dying. The muscles that we use to speak, these are the bulbar muscles. For some patients, that's their first symptom. Usually a loved one will say, your voice sounds a little funny. And then it progresses. to the point where they can no longer verbally communicate. Some folks are able to still write for a period of time, so they'll just get out a pad and write.
We also tell them to make sure that you are doing exactly what that person needs, moving at their speed, because it could be very dangerous otherwise. If a caregiver is pushing somebody too fast, the person could fall, they can be injured, because they're pushing maybe further with range of motion, those kind of things.
Well, I think that with anyone who's looking for a home health care aide, and also the home health care aide needs to appreciate this, is there's going to be an initial kind of orientation. And that orientation, at least for me, is going to be, is this a right feel for a home health care aide? You want someone who's going to be consistently your home health care aide, who's going to come into your house and interact with your family. So I think that this is kind of a statement of the obvious, but if I were home health care aide with an ALS patient, I think I would regularly remind myself that as the body goes, the ability to speak goes, the ability to communicate in any way, that they are perfectly normal mentally, and they have the mental capacity. They can be spoken to with certain technology. They can respond, and you have to remember that.
As the disease progresses, people with ALS experience one or more of the following complications. ALS eventually paralyzes the muscles needed to breathe. Some consumers may need devices to assist breathing at night. In the latter stages of ALS, some people choose to have a tracheotomy, a surgically created hole at the front of the neck leading to the windpipe. When the motor nerves can no longer send messages to the voluntary muscles, there is muscle weakness in the arms, legs, speech, swallowing, or breathing muscles. These muscles begin to atrophy or waste away. When the muscles that control swallowing are affected, people with ALS can develop malnutrition and dehydration. It is important to monitor your consumers' food and water intake so they do not develop dehydration or malnutrition. Many ALS patients experience some degree of swallowing difficulty. Softer foods such as eggs, mashed potatoes, and pasta require less energy to eat. Also encourage them to take smaller bites and chew and swallow slowly. But keep in mind that ALS generally does not affect thinking or memory. It is unique in each person, in the areas of the body affected, as well as the rate of progression. About 10 years ago, Thornton noticed his hands were shaking while drinking a cup of coffee. Months later, he had difficulties walking up and down steps. A few years later, and a few falls later, he was diagnosed with ALS. Thornton's father died of ALS, so he knows of the devastation it can have on someone and their family. Nick Minio is his home care aide and the bright light in his day. They share a very special bond. Nick knows taking care of someone with ALS is very different than other consumers.
Well, it definitely requires a lot more patience. You got to be much slower. And one of the big things to understand with an ALS patient is that their mind is still there, for the most part, at least from what I've noticed. So a lot of times I think that for the regular lay person, or for anybody for that matter, you see a person with ALS and you assume that because they're unable to move, or because their body's in a certain way, or they're contorted in a certain way, that you almost speak to them a little bit more condescendingly, like, hey, can I help you with anything? How are you today? And one of the things that I've done is it's just a person who can't move certain parts of their body, or sometimes all of their body. And I guess I've never looked at them as not being I've always just talked to them in a way that I would talk to one of my friends, or talk to a colleague or a coworker, or something along those lines. Really, we have such a reciprocal relationship where he's able to help me and guide me in almost like a fatherly or a grandfatherly type of way, and I'm able to help him with the simple things that he's not able to do. So he has a very sharp mind. He's a brilliant guy. And I'm able to ask him questions to kind of help me along my travels as I'm learning and growing. And I'm able to help him to kind of, he kind of, I guess, finds his youth in me in a sense. So, we're both able to kind of give to the other person what it is that they need. And I think that's what's most important in a relationship, especially with home care.
Assisting your consumer with range of motion exercises is important. but always check with their physical therapist on how best you can help them.
The person cannot do it on their own. They may still be able to do it. So I might have a weak arm, but I can still do this. So I would say, Mr. Smith, have you done your shoulder exercises yet? Okay. If they can't do it, that's when the aide would step in to do the exercises.
Nick goes through daily exercises with Thornton. These exercises are designed and approved by certified physical therapists. Neck exercises are especially important with consumers like him with severe ALS.
What I do is I'll slide his body up and then kind of put my body against him. And the easiest way, instead of getting into technical terms that I do, is I do yes, no's, and idle no's. It's real simple. Straighten him out like this. Keep both my hands on him. Keep a nice right on his forehead and on the back of his head to keep good support. Keep him up like this, usually about like 10 seconds, 10 to 15 seconds in each position. And here's the yes. Down and right to the side. Hold it there for 10 to 15 seconds. Come back with it. And then do the nose. One way. And then for another. And the idle nose is basically just the back and forth. I mean, it's just a really simple, and do that for about like three sets or whatnot. Pull them down, back to each side. And even when we do it, we mess around. I go, yes, no, I don't know. And then for his arm, same thing. Basically, I straighten him out like this, and I end up do his raises like so. I do 10 of these for him. Now he only gets to a certain motion. You can really hear in his shoulder just as it cracks, so he can't get too high with it. But I do like 10 or 15 of those, and then I'd go like this with him. Come out, come in, bend his arm like that. Do 10 of those, and then I also go to his hand like so, and just move them right like this for him. So he's getting good. Because this hand is what's really the most important for him. It's what does all of his work, his mouse, his chair movement, everything. And the same thing with his legs. He usually does his leg exercises actually while he's in the chair. Show him what you do. And he goes actually in between and is able to bend them at the knee. So he has actually really good movement out of his legs. He's able to stand. But just simple exercises. It's not about doing a lot of them. It's just about doing it consistently. A couple times a week. I'm here usually 3 times a week.
It is important to realize that ALS is a family disease. It affects the family in so many ways.
It really impacts the people around them. So it can impact the adult children, it could impact little children, grandchildren, the spouse. So I think it's really a family disease because the family members are now going to be put in a position to take over the roles and tasks that person once provided to their family. So they're not only going to have their job that they provided to the family, but they're going to have the identified patient's responsibilities as well. So it can be very overwhelming and stressful.
Neil's wife Suzanne knows it's important to treat them like you would anyone else, and showing a sense of humor is part of that.
I think sometimes showing respect includes showing a sense of humor, and remembering that he's still there. He's still the same hilarious, mischievous, smart, loving person that he always was. They're still in that body, and they want to laugh too, and enjoy life, and enjoy touch, and enjoy sensations that the rest of us enjoy. That they're not just a body. There's no paralysis necessarily with this to the extent that they can't feel. And I know I'll have to remind myself of that, when I'm dealing with him day in and day out and trying to get things done, trying to remember that he still feels inside, in his mind as well as on his body.
Sally's home care aides were very helpful in so many ways. She offers other suggestions.
They should just be, I would say, upbeat with him, talk to him about, my husband liked TV, so put something that's, that he'd enjoy on television, try to encourage them, to do different things. Exercise is another thing. They need to have their legs and their arms moved frequently throughout a day, because they become stiff, and that's one of the important things. They should know how to transfer, because if they're in a situation like I was, and probably even if I had a bathroom on the first floor, I would not have been able to get him in there. So you have to be able to transfer him to a commode chair and be safe yourself, and that is difficult.
You understand where your place is and where your place is not. So one of the biggest things is that you have to be emotionally supportive to the family. And you have to be flexible, because the family needs you to be flexible as well.
I try not to get too involved, because every family has their own structure. But if they're coming to me or if they're asking me for something, what I just try to do is just alleviate any kind of stress that I can within the short period of time that I'm there. So if I can just do something simple like change a light bulb for Phyllis, like that's something that she didn't have to worry about for the rest of the day at least.
Neil and Suzanne know it is so important to live for the moment and appreciate all that they do have.
It's the knowledge that this is, our plans have changed significantly, but it's also the way we've chosen to react to it is to try to pack a lot of things in, get a lot of experiences together, make a lot of memories with the kids, and we're really trying to get a lot in, and we're very busy.
And like anyone with ALS, Neil does have realistic fears.
Well, if somebody were to ask me, my greatest fear about having ALS is just imagining total paralysis. It's kind of the obvious. It's what happens to ALS patients when you're laying in bed and you can't move whatsoever. And what does that mean? You can imagine it. I'm sure people who don't have ALS, people who are watching this, may be imagining it right now as I say it. Because I can still move around and being affected, I too can only imagine it, but it's going to happen to me.
And with this limited sense of time, they wanted to do something positive with their ALS diagnosis, and in doing so, established the LiveLikeLou.org Foundation, using the fine example that Lou Gehrig set.
Today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth.
To pay honor to the example that he set, I think we all know his classic "I'm the luckiest man in the world" speech that he gave July 4th, 1939, Yankee Stadium. After he was diagnosed with ALS, he could have been why me. He could have been angry, but he instead on the world stage decided to show the world how fortunate he felt. And that's how we felt. So we wanted to kind of live up to his example and help other people with ALS.
We hope our kids will be able to look back on this and say, well, Mom and Dad faced some pretty tough challenges and they leaned in. They didn't turn away, So that gives us a little bit of hope, a little bit of a silver lining, that our kids will find challenges in their future and they'll be able to stand on our shoulders.
And Nick knows making it fun can make it all worthwhile, for both he and Thornton.
We both have a good sense of humor, which is nice. So, when people ask me what I do all the time, I tell them, and, they always get the same look. They go, oh, like it's a very somber or a very depressing type of thing. And I guess on the surface or on paper, it does seem like it would be a really depressing thing, but I tell everybody, like, I'm a bit of a clown, so I just usually turn it into a circus anyway. And it just makes it more fun, makes the day go faster. It doesn't make it feel like it's a job. Sometimes I even feel weird getting paid by some of the clients that I'm with because they have become such...
You never told us that.
He said I never told us that. It really is, it becomes, it's like seeing your friends every day, It really is. It's just how it's become with me.
The National ALS Association offers support programs for families and can help with assistive devices and other technology that can help ALS patients. Their number is 1-800-782-4747. For more information about assistive devices, check out the video Assistive Devices to Help Seniors and People with Disabilities right here on My Learning Center.
Again, a little bit more like